The night he asked me that question, the city was holding its breath. Rain clung to the windows in thin silver lines, and the streetlights blurred into halos that felt too soft for what was about to happen. We were alone in his office long after everyone else had gone home, the kind of alone that isn't empty but charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I had told myself 100 times that I knew him, that I understood the careful distance we kept, the rules we never said out loud. I was wrong. He stood by the desk, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, looking like a man who had reached the edge of a decision and wasn't sure whether to step back or jump. I pretended to read the papers in front of me, but the words swam. I could feel his eyes on me, heavy and intent, and it made my pulse stumble. We had always been like this, circling, never touching, pretending the heat between us was just the room being too small. "Can I ask you something?" he said. His voice was quiet, almost careful, and that was what made my stomach tighten. I nodded without looking up, afraid that if I met his eyes he would see everything I was trying to hide. He didn't speak right away. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, until I finally looked at him. There was something different in his expression, something raw and unguarded that I had never seen before. "What would you do?" he began, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. "What would you do if wanting someone meant destroying everything you've built?" The question hit me like a sudden drop. For a second I couldn't breathe. He wasn't asking about work. He wasn't asking in theory. He was asking me. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I wanted to laugh it off, to give him a safe answer, something distant and polite. Instead, the truth rose in my throat, sharp and dangerous. "I don't know," I said slowly. "I guess it depends on how much you already lost by not wanting them." His eyes darkened and the air between us shifted. He took a step closer and instinctively I stepped back, my legs brushing the edge of the desk. We were too close now, close enough that I could smell his cologne, warm and familiar. Close enough that every boundary we had carefully maintained felt thin as glass. "This is exactly what I'm afraid of," he said. "Because every time I try to stop, it gets worse." I should have ended it right there. I should have reminded him who we were, what this could cost us. Instead, I stayed silent, and my silence was an answer. He noticed. Of course he did. His gaze dropped to my lips for just a second, and that single glance felt more intimate than any touch. "You don't have to say anything," he added, his voice low. "Just tell me to stop." I opened my mouth. The word stop formed in my mind, clear and sensible and safe. But when I tried to say it, nothing came out. My chest felt tight, my hands trembling at my sides. I had spent months pretending that what I felt was harmless, that it would fade if I ignored it. Standing there with him, I realized how badly I had lied to myself. He exhaled slowly, like a man bracing himself, and leaned in just enough that our foreheads almost touched. Almost. The restraint in that tiny space hurt more than contact would have. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the closeness, by the knowledge that one small movement could change everything. "This is wrong," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "I know," he replied immediately. "That's why I tried not to feel it." There was something darkly honest in the way he said it, like he had already accepted the consequences. My heart ached at that, at the idea that he had been carrying this alone, fighting the same battle I had. I opened my eyes, and when our gazes met, there was no pretending left. Whatever lived between us had been seen, named, and it was too late to put it back in the shadows. He stepped away first, as if forcing himself to remember reality. For a moment, relief washed through me, followed quickly by something sharper and more painful. He turned toward the window, his back to me, shoulders tense. "I shouldn't have asked," he said. "Forget I did." I watched him, torn between gratitude and regret. Forgetting would be easier. Forgetting would be safer. But it would also be a lie, and I was tired of lying. My voice shook when I spoke again. "I can't forget it," I said. "Because I've been asking myself the same thing." He turned back slowly, surprise flickering across his face before it was replaced by something darker, more intense. The silence that followed was different now, alive and restless. He took a step toward me again, stopping just short of touching. "Then tell me," he said quietly. "What would you do?" I swallowed, my heart pounding. The answer felt dangerous, but it also felt true. "I would be terrified," I said. "And I would probably make the wrong choice." A faint, almost sad smile crossed his lips. "So would I." The rain outside intensified, drumming against the glass like a countdown. We stood there, suspended in that moment, both of us knowing that once we moved, there would be no going back. He reached out, hesitated, then let his hand fall back to his side. "This ends tonight," he said as if convincing himself. "We walk out of this room and nothing changes." I nodded even as my chest tightened. "Okay." But when we moved toward the door, our shoulders brushed, accidental and brief, yet it sent a jolt through me. He froze. I froze. The fragile resolve we had built cracked instantly. He turned, and before I could think, he spoke again. "Tell me to leave," he said. "Right now." I looked at him, at the conflict etched into his face, at the man who had always been controlled and distant now standing on the edge of something reckless. The power of that moment scared me. It thrilled me too. I hated myself for that. "Leave," I said. He didn't move. The word hung between us, hollow and ineffective. My breath caught, and I realized that saying it wasn't enough if neither of us believed it. His eyes searched mine as if looking for permission or forgiveness or both. "I tried," he said softly. "God knows I tried." That was when I understood that this wasn't about a single question or a single moment. It was about everything we had been denying, every glance held too long, every conversation that drifted too close to the edge. The darkness of it wasn't in what we wanted, but in how deeply we had buried it. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything," I said. "You're not," he replied. "You're the reason I remember what it feels like to want something." The honesty of that broke something in me. I stepped closer, closing the space he had been so careful to keep. He didn't stop me. His breath hitched, and I felt the tension in him, the restraint barely holding. "This can't be simple," I said. "It was never going to be," he answered. When he finally touched me, it was gentle, almost reverent, his fingers brushing my hand like he was asking permission without words. The contact was electric, sending warmth racing up my arm. It wasn't the touch of a man taking something. It was the touch of someone afraid of how much it mattered. We stood like that, hands barely entwined, and in that quiet, forbidden closeness, the world outside felt very far away. I knew this was the beginning of something complicated and painful and impossible to explain. I also knew that pretending it didn't exist would hurt even more. "I don't know how this ends," I said. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I know I don't want to pretend anymore." The rain began to slow, the city exhaling at last. We were still standing in his office, still surrounded by everything we weren't supposed to risk. And yet, in that moment, with his hand in mine and his question echoing in my mind, I understood that some lines, once crossed, don't ruin you. They reveal you. He had asked me something I never expected. And I hadn't given him the answer either of us thought we would hear.